Larry Fink is in this group too, and he doesn't. I mean, to think that he wants to make a more inclusive world is insane. He's interested in increasing the amount of assets that BlackRock manages, and pretty much only that. So these are the people that are essentially behind a lot of the net zero plans, behind a lot of the other SDG plans that essentially move us from the model, the free market capitalist model, into more this technocratic model where every commodity, everything is going to be tokenized. And you've seen Larry Fink in the past couple of days be very open about that, following the approval of the BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF, for example, talking about the tokenization revolution and all of this. But there's an effort here to take this, much farther than it's ever been taken before, and to essentially just not just tokenize, existing assets or traditional assets, but also create new asset classes like natural assets, all these natural asset corporations that have sort of been in the news lately and have sort of, received some pushback. But there's definitely a lot of efforts underway to essentially tokenize the whole planet, increase the amount of assets in the existing economy by being like, now this lake is an asset, now this forest is an asset, and all of this stuff, tokenize, fractionalize it, and basically create this insane new financial system that's different than previous financial systems. But everything, including nature and humans, will be tokenized and traded like financial products. And that's essentially what a lot of this is leading to. And you have most of the countries on the world, those that are pursuing Agenda 2030, essentially leading us into that. And so, at some level, I think the geopolitical push and pull between, BRICS and the West is real. But I think, at the higher levels, they ultimately agree on the goals. So I don't really think one is necessarily a true effective challenge to the other. And if you're against the ambitions of the SDGs and Agenda 2030, then you should be against them regardless of if they're being championed by Russia and China or the United States and the EU. Ultimately, it leads us to the same place. Which is going to financialize and tokenize everything, but also surveil everything to an unprecedented extent.
Whitney Webb issues a cautionary note regarding BlackRock's intentions to enter the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency sphere, portraying it as a concerning development. She asserts that their primary motive is to expand their assets under management and tokenize various assets, all aimed at a singular objective: eradicating online privacy and exerting greater control. For those unfamiliar with BlackRock, she highlights their status as the most powerful and influential company globally, currently holding the title of the largest asset manager with over $1 trillion under their management. Essentially, they have significant ownership stakes in numerous companies worldwide. In early 2024, BlackRock, along with their CEO Larry Fink, ventured into the realm of Bitcoin by launching a Bitcoin ETF. Whitney Webb warns against viewing this as a positive step, emphasizing that it should not be celebrated. She encourages viewers to stay tuned until the end of the video, where she dissects BlackRock's long-term strategies.
Mark Carney and Fink and all of these guys, under the auspices of the UN, talked about reimagining the World Bank and the...
Before we continue with the rest of the video, do check out Daily 5-Minute Crypto Newsletter with all the latest crypto and Bitcoin news. It's a fantastic analysis of on-chain crypto data and breakdowns, and the best part is it's absolutely free. They'll cover expert predictions, breakdowns of on-chain crypto data, and any breaking news you need to know, all in a nutshell. Click the first link in the description and enter your email to join over 50,000 others in becoming a better crypto investor right now.
IMF, all the multilateral development banks, for the purpose of basically using debt to finance the SDGs and doing all these things like debt for climate swaps, debt for nature swaps, which are essentially, land grabs and all sorts of things, framing it as, necessary to save the planet. And maybe that justification works for the left, but I think it would be naive to assume that they aren't going to retool the talking points to appeal to the right. I think that's definitely going to be happening. And if you look at Fink himself, he's tried to go away from being the point man for ESG and all of this towards a guy that's saying, like, look how profitable this is going to be for us. And you can have a part of the riches by tokenizing your land and putting it on this platform where it can be traded and whatever. Like, you can have a piece of all this wealth and whatever. I think that's how they're going to try and frame it. And I think people need to be very very aware, because, you know, the efforts to manipulate us to acquiesce to this system are unprecedented. And I think ultimately, if you have a good grasp of what they want to enact on the global stage, regardless of the justifications or the political figures they use, or influencers and media that they try to use to sell this to you, if you are firm in your opposition to these agendas, then you'll be able to sort through the nonsense. Because, as you said, you know, all the stuff coming out online is increasingly just so psyop after psyop after psyop. And, you know, it's hard to know who to trust and who to believe, what have you. But if you know that the end goal is global governance, mass surveillance, the end of privacy, all of that, you can look at who is pushing those agendas and say no. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to say no. You have to know what your red lines are, and you have to make it about trusting your red lines and trusting where you stand, not so much trusting this political savior or that political savior or this media influencer, which I think a lot of people have been doing. And I think it's definitely time for another model, particularly when it comes to US presidential politics, because how many times can we vote for the lesser of two evils and have a good outcome? You know, it's never happened, and it's not going to keep happening. And, you know, all of these efforts, you know, in the case of Trump, to like explain away his decisions last time and act like it's going to be different this time. We can't wait to see what's going to happen this time. The situation has come to a head arguably already, and it's up to people to find local solutions and build something with their communities that will help them protect, you know, help everyone in that community protect themselves against all these stressors and crises that are to come. Because waiting for the right guy to get in the White House, regardless of who he is and whatever intention and motivation he has, one guy in the White House is not going to solve all of this, because arguably, you know, the president is really a figurehead, because at this point, the US is so bureaucratic and massive. It doesn't really matter who gets elected, you know, every 4 years in a November. The agenda is going to continue. And I think people need to really get wise about that. And particularly now, where, you know, presidential politics is pushed to the forefront of both mainstream and independent media, you know, it's increasing. It really has been for some time a circus at the end of the day. And I think we should be paying attention to these really real issues and increasingly focus on solutions, which I think, you know, finds very little airtime in independent media these days, which I think is definitely a trend I'd like to see reversed, because it's definitely time to start building something parallel to this Agenda 2030 stuff. Because a lot of the way this digital ID stuff, CBDCs or their private sector equivalents, are going to be forced onto the people is when, you know, the food supply is under attack, or, you know, there's some sort of crisis there. And the only way to get your rations is to follow the same model that's been rolled out by the UN's World Food Program, which is essentially the same model by produced by Sam Altman's WorldCoin. Scan your eyeball, and you have a digital ID tied to your eyeball and a digital wallet. And every time you check out, you scan your eyeball at the cash register, and it deducts the money of the cost of what you purchased from your, you know, rations wallet. And if you don't submit to that system, you don't eat. And the World Food Program does this to millions of refugees every day in Ukraine, in the Middle East, and elsewhere. And the plan is to have this happen essentially everywhere. Yeah, so I think information is a big part of it. And I think there's a lot of different ways to try and use that to our advantage. I think it might be helpful for some people in independent media in the United States to try and stage some sort of low-cost return to print, because obviously a lot of the efforts that they're making are in the digital realm. And trying to get us increasingly dependent on that. And I think physical media is going to be important. And I think it's, you know, a good choice too, because, you know, people that read actual physical books, I think there was a study about how that's, you know, better for cognition long term than constantly reading everything on screens. So I think that would be good. And I think also, you know, there's this definite effort to regulate the internet. And once that happens, the internet of today will no longer exist. And so I think while the internet, even though it's definitely worse off than it probably was several years ago, now is definitely a good time to make offline libraries of things that you think will be useful, whether it's for things like traditional skills, so you can homestead at some point in the future, or, you know, about actual world history or really any topic of interest, if you can store that offline in a hard drive, so when you want to go and access that information, you don't have to be like, oh, dang it, I have to have a digital ID to access YouTube now or something like that. You won't be in that type of position. So I definitely think people should be trying to make essentially information stores your own personal library of Alexandria. Going forward. And there's also some interesting efforts to try and, I guess, sort of use infrastructure that the elites plan to use going forward to try and allow broad access to information. There's an interesting effort to use the Bitcoin blockchain, for example. Some of these new, they haven't been programmed yet, but some people have sort of thought out the mechanisms for how to essentially create, basically a WikiLeaks 2.0 and have like information publicly available to everyone by publishing directly onto Bitcoin and stuff like that going forward. I think, if obvious efforts by people like Larry Fink and others to have Bitcoin be an important asset class going forward in the financial realm. So in order for them to stop the information being published there, they would have to nix all of their plans to co-opt Bitcoin and use it as an asset class to back up all of these different things. So that's an interesting case of sort of, using the same technology they want to use essentially against them to allow broad public access to information they don't want in the hands of people. And there's, different ways to I think tackle that, whether it's by building, getting off of big tech and starting to use more like open source alternatives, not necessarily tied to big tech. There's a lot that we can do to try and, get around these issues. But ultimately, we have to get creative about the information war in the information space, because it's definitely one of our best assets and tools in terms of waking people up and trying to stop or mitigate a lot of what's happening, is to try and raise awareness about it, which is obviously through the distribution of information. And so I think, we have to get a lot more creative about that, because traditionally, we've been very focused on these platforms that are very much captured by these Silicon Valley entities that are part of what's happening. And we can't continue to be completely dependent on them if we want to stop what they're doing as it relates to censorship and in this, broader information war. And I think there's, in terms of building parallel systems, we should really be doing that on every level, not just, for information and big tech. And, as you said earlier, it's really all about building robust local communities that can be resilient and withstand a lot of what's to come.
So, Whitney Webb brings attention to BlackRock's entry into Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency sphere. The significance of this move is profound and wide-reaching. Whitney's insights highlight the potential risks of BlackRock's ambitions to further extend their already substantial influence by digitizing assets, possibly compromising online privacy. It's crucial to remember that BlackRock isn't just any company, it's the largest asset manager globally. Their actions in the financial realm aren't mere ripples but substantial waves capable of reshaping the entire landscape. Whitney's caution regarding BlackRock's involvement in the Bitcoin ETF serves as a reminder for vigilance and critical analysis of the broader implications when powerful entities like BlackRock impact emerging digital currencies. We encourage everyone to contemplate the shared information and, as always, conduct independent research to develop their understanding of these intricate matters. Given the ever-evolving nature of finance, staying well-informed is paramount for navigating its complexities effectively. For more Daily Dose Crypto news, check out these 2 awesome videos on your screen. Click now and we will see you on the next video.